I will call the meeting to order. Begin by reading the checklist here. This is a checklist to ensure meetings are compliant with the right to know law during the state of emergency. As chair of the Sanborn Regional School Board's Excellence in Student Achievement Subcommittee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. Members of the Sanborn Regional School Board's Excellence in Student Achievement Subcommittee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 1-646-558-8656, meeting ID 944-5976-20, or by clicking on the following website address: www.youtube.com/c/SRSD meeting videos. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website of the Regional School District, Sanborn Regional School District, at www.sau17.net. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 978-482-7394 or email at helpdesk@sau17.net. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I will begin. Tammy Mahoney. I'm in my home. There are family members in and out. Jamie?
Jamie Fitzpatrick. I'm in my home office. I'm alone.
We welcome Don Dutton, a new member of our committee.
Hi, thank you. Dawn Dutton. I am in my home. No one is in the room with me, but there are family members in the house.
Patty?
Patty Haynes, Director of Teaching and Learning. I'm home alone.
Christopher? Can you hear me, Chris? No, we'll move on. Christine?
Yes, Christine DeRocher. I am at my home and currently only my dog is here.
Brian?
Brian Stack, principal. I was alone, but I can hear children now down on the first floor.
Ryan?
Hello, Ryan McCluskey, and I am alone in my office.
Jody?
Hi, Jody Gutterman, Director of Student Services. I am currently alone at my house, but there are other family members inside.
Tom?
Mr. Ambrose, aka Baby Yoda. Trent, I'm on my way home from an eye doctor appointment, so I'm going to keep you on mute unless I need to speak, but it's nice to see you all.
Mr. Snyder, can you hear us now?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Much better.
Okay. Yes, I'm in my backyard. 2 of my 4 children are around, but they're not in earshot right now.
Thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Can I have a motion? Do I have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
I will second. I know Don wasn't present. Is there any discussion? All in favor by a roll call vote? Jamie?
Aye.
I, Dawn?
I will abstain because I was not present.
Yep. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, moving on to our first order of business is the remote learning plan reports. I'll turn this over to Dr. Haynes to kind of coordinate.
Thank you. So I shared earlier in the week, and my days are all blending together. So I know that the subcommittee received copies of plans from the elementary level, the middle level, and the high school level for what we're planning to do with remote learning. And in those plans, there were a lot of details that, since we've been able to plan ahead for this compared to what we were faced with in the spring last year, there's a lot more details, a lot more fleshed out. I would remind the public that is listening that last year when we went into remote learning on March 13th, it was initially for 2 weeks, and then it was extended again for 2 more weeks. And we were really in a week to week, moment to moment kind of situation. And it really was emergency teaching. It was not teaching where we could have any sort of planning. The remote learning plans that we've put together to begin the school year this year, beginning with our students on September 8th, are far more fleshed out, far more detailed, much more robust, and will offer students a better learning experience. From that, I think I would turn it over to the principals of each of the buildings to speak to their plans, or unless Chair Mahoney, you'd like us to do it another way, it's up to you. You want to go through these remote learning plans?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so why don't we start with Chris at Bakey? That will be the pre-K through 3 school. And you can speak a little bit, Chris, about your plans, how they're developmentally appropriate for children at that age, and what you've included that we did not have last time.
Okay. Just confirming you can all still hear me, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So as you've reviewed the document, much of what's in all of these plans is very similar. And so I don't know how detailed we need to be about, the guiding principles and all of those kinds of things. I can walk through that if that's what you would like me to do.
No, I think, does anyone feel the need to walk through the guiding principles?
Don't.
No.
I'll skip that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, as I'm looking at the document, I'm scrolling down to where the table is. Bakey School's table is directly above Memorial Schools. And so basically the format of the day would be such that our students would have a designated time from their teachers where they would have a morning meeting that's virtual, a live virtual Google Meet or Zoom call every day, Monday through Thursday. And this is very similar to what would have happened if we were learning, in school. One of the first things they do after they get settled is have a morning meeting that goes along with responsive classroom. What then would happen is that from there, they'll kind of set the expectations for the day, review what the students can anticipate will happen. And then somehow, like throughout the day, we'll have to flesh out the schedule more specifically with our grade level teachers and our staff later this week when we have our team leader summit. But they'll have a math lesson, a reading lesson, and a writing lesson every day. What we would anticipate is that those lessons would be pre-recorded, meaning they would be something like a YouTube video. The reason for that is that we cannot record any kind of Zoom or Google Meet session that has minors in it for legal reasons and then rebroadcast that. You have the capability to record those environments, but we can't allow other people to view that. So we would ask teachers to pre-record their math lesson, their reading lesson, their writing lesson every day. And then students would have scheduled times where there would be a live Google Meet or Zoom session where they would meet with their teacher. That could be either in a small group setting, a whole group setting potentially, or even just individually, depending on their need. So if I'm a student at home, what that looks like is I would watch a 10 to 15 minute mini lesson for math, reading or writing. And then at some point I would have then a face-to-face virtual experience with my teacher. They would also have one special, a unified art special, either art, music, gym, or art, music, PE, or STEAM throughout the day. And then we have WIN, which is what I need, which would be our scheduled intervention block. That's where students would have access to either their teacher, again, an interventionist, a specialist like a reading specialist or someone on our staff to work through some of that extra support that they need. And then we just wanted to build in essentially a recess period of some kind that's definitely screen-free time. One thing that's on our table here is the approximate total number of hours. So if you're in pre-K, we're thinking that's approximately 3 hours. K and 1, 4 hours. Grades 2 and 3, approximately 5 hours. Total time of learning. That is certainly not total screen hours times, throughout the day. What we're expecting is that there will be those scheduled blocks, but students will meet, live with their teacher for a period of the day, but they'll be doing a lot of more independent tasks or guided tasks at home with those that are, overseeing them. I think that captures it.
One thing I would have the committee just take a look at is the developmental appropriateness of the time that the children are spending with the lessons, where you have kindergarten, shorter lessons, shorter amounts of time. And as you move toward 3rd grade, it's going to be longer periods of time, longer sessions working on things with their teachers. So if you look at that yellow box at the bottom, those numbers are, and if you take a look even further into Memorial, the numbers are increasing to where we've got 5.5 hours maximum up through grade 6, which would be learning time, not necessarily screen time. There's going to be screen time within there, but not straight 5.5 hours on the screen. And then the teachers would have an additional probably 2.5, possibly 3 hours of work where they would be doing prepping, meetings, following up with emails, those kinds of things. So the teachers would be working a complete day for themselves also. So that would go through the amount of time that the students are spending in class. And then in the plan goes through and explains all those different components that Chris was talking about. Independent learning days have been moved to Friday, and the reason for that is because we strongly believed we needed continuity in learning for students Monday through Thursday. We wanted to make sure that we were able to adhere to giving them continuity, having teachers following up with things, spending Friday for the teachers, following up with students, having phone calls, meetings, office hours, those kinds of things. But also there's a huge component in there where we have a consultant who will be coming to work with the 4th through 6th grade teachers in mathematics professional development, and she's available on Fridays because of her children's school schedule. And so we wanted to make sure that that was a robust time as well. So it's not that, geez, the teachers are getting a 3-day weekend, because I know that that's something that's come up even on, some of the conversations with some of my friends that I've had. It's more about making sure that we have continuity Monday through Thursday with the students, making sure that they keep going. We're building on what they're learning. They're able to sort of put everything together on a Friday and then give teachers some time to catch up and plan forward.
Can I add one more thing?
Yep.
One other thing that just came to mind is that we have to be cognizant that not every family is going to be able to make this work in real time. That's another reason why we wanted to pre-record our mini lessons. One thought that Mr. McCluskey and I had was to have our staff utilize, if they're on the clock, so to speak, from 8 till 3, if they start their morning meetings at around 9 a.m. every day, that first hour from 8 to 9 could be used for families who are using asynchronous learning to get any kind of feedback or get help for their kids at the very beginning of the day.
Brian, did you want to speak to anything in grades 4 through 6 in addition to or different from what Chris has already spoken about?
Sure. I'll toss in a few more things. I think Chris did a nice job of capturing kind of what the elementary vision is. And honestly, elementary is not the right term. It's really what our Sanborn vision is. I think when we we're putting this together, and looking at how to better plan for remote learning this fall. I don't know if anybody remembers, we may have had one or I don't know, two surveys go out over the last 6 months or so, but we got a lot of feedback, from the community, families, students, that really helped to drive some of the decision making that went into this. And we're looking at these first 6 weeks. We're looking at um, meeting students where they are instructionally, building upon existing knowledge, introducing some new content, but also looking at that feedback that we received and making sure that we hit areas that might not have been hit to the with the depth that we would have done otherwise if we were in person. So, we really are trying to be mindful of how we're going to make that dive into the fall. As I look into the schedule, um, you know, one of the big pieces of feedback that I feel like we received as a school community is that um, families and students really wanted more regular direct interaction with staff, whether that be through that daily morning meeting, whether that be through the pre-recorded video lessons, the regular win times, or the regular small group sessions. So we do have, as it's clear in the schedule that Chris kind of walked through, that daily piece there that students will be seeing their teacher and seeing their peers on a regular basis for those that are available to join a morning meeting. But for those that aren't, there will be regular opportunities to engage with the teacher that's a bit more structured and consistent. I know that between teachers and grade levels, there wasn't always that level of consistency, but we're really having um, those conversations with staff in the next week that are going to make that the experience that you might get in one fourth grade classroom very similar to the experience you'll get in another fourth grade classroom or a fifth grade classroom. So tightening that piece up was a big part of this process. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit because I think that's something that was on a lot of parents' minds and I'm sure a lot of students' minds through the spring. Without going too much more detail, because I feel like my other principal colleagues are going to want to go into some of these other aspects, but I think that's a pretty good snapshot of where we are right now. And certainly once we go through this, I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Christine, do you want to address the middle school?
I have to unmute myself, absolutely. So looking at the middle school plan and looking specifically at, I believe it's page 5, where we actually have the chart in front of us, students would begin their day in advisory because one of the things that we reflected upon during the remote learning process was really the time to further develop relationships with students, being able to offer some of that social and emotional learning components with kiddos. And so that would take place for 30 minutes in the morning. So students would be logging in and going right into their advisories. Students would be strategically placed in an advisory with a teacher that would match their needs. And then along with Megan Arena, who is our school counselor and amazing, she spent some time this summer meeting and working on what our advisory program looks like under the Choose Love movement. So from there, the students would then go into their core classes where they would begin with a pre-recorded direct instruction video after a basic check-in and welcome from the teacher and an intro and this is what we're doing today, that type of focus to more of a pre-recorded lesson. And as Ryan and Chris both mentioned, we wanted something that was pre-recorded because we recognize that a lot of students don't have time to be logging in first thing in the morning with us or maybe in the afternoon because of various schedules families have. So we wanted that direct instruction recorded so students could watch it later on. Students that needed to watch it multiple times, they were able to do that as well. So a student that may need to have a math lesson re-taught to them will able to have that, or a parent could even then watch it that evening when they get home from work and are able to help their child with some algebraic equation, let's say. Then students would be moving into what's a workshop model. So we have 90-minute classes. So the kiddos would start with the video, and then small groups would be organized. These small groups would be based on data. And this is where the intervention is going to be embedded. So not only the teacher would be part of this, but also the interventionist is needed. And they would be moving through various groups. We looked at really how much attention a middle school student needs. And then when that attention is lost, they would move on to the next activity. So for example, within a language arts class, that child might be reading a small excerpt from a text. Then in the next 10-minute activity, they might be working on some vocabulary within context. And then moving on to the next activity, they might be doing an open response writing assignment. Our goal was to make sure students were reading and writing on a daily basis. Students will be ending their day within a unified arts class. They have 2 UA classes, also within a Google Meet, and they will also be doing independent work, live check-ins in the same way that our classroom teachers would be doing. And live check-ins, I really think about that in regards to when we're all in school, or when you remember from your own schooling experiences, it's after the teacher would give their direct instruction and they would be walking around the room checking for understanding. It's that type of thing when you're talking about those small group pieces. And then the teachers would be ending their day, obviously doing sort of a wrap up, that exit ticket to making sure the lesson was understood by the students and then what needs to be retaught. So again, you will see and hear the physical activity. We want students to take a break that'll take place along with their lunch block. So that's something that the students will be able to have 30 minutes of non-screen time. We want them to go outside. We recognize that they're middle school kids, but they're also still kids. And they have a right, they want to run and they want to play and they want to shoot some hoops, that type of stuff. So our time is approximately 5.5 hours as well. I hope I was thorough enough. I didn't go into too much detail, but
And that leaves you, Brian, to go next.
All right, thanks, Patty. Thanks, everybody. So in the high school document, the only other things I want to point out, we had a couple of teachers, Aaron Cass and Dr. Tim Young, who did a little research this spring and into the summer on what worked and what didn't from remote learning at Sanborn. And they put together some recommendations from their research, which we actually quoted in our remote learning document. That's actually some research if you're interested in reading a little deeper. Patty has a copy of it and would be, I'm sure, more than willing to share with you. Our take at the high school, as you know, we did have a synchronous schedule this past spring. And our goal was really how to turn engagement, which is what we think we had in the spring, to meaningful engagement this fall. So there's some adjustments that we're looking to make, primarily at the instructional level. So we're going to be spending a lot of time this fall working with our staff on pedagogy, to use the teacher speak, but really just helping them better understand how to teach in a environment and provide activities and lessons that are engaging for kids in a remote format, which can look very different, whether it's a math teacher or an English teacher or a 9th grade class or a 12th grade class. So lots of different training that we're going to be doing, drawing from some internal experience, things that people have learned, but we'll look outside if we need to. I do want to draw your attention to the schedule, because the schedule that we're going to run with this fall does look a little different from the one that we used in the spring. So first and foremost, other principals have spoken to this. We're moving the flex day from Wednesday to Friday. Serves a lot of the same purposes that the other principals already spoke to. The day has been stretched out a little bit longer, so it starts and ends at the same time that we would be if we were in session. And we have to be mindful of the Seacoast School of Technology, because they, in the spring, the schedule that we had did not align with SST's schedule. So our kids did not have the opportunity to do synchronous work in SST. And SST, of course, they're starting in person, but things could change. So with this schedule, our periods are aligned in such a way so that kids who are taking SST would be able to take advantage of in-person or synchronous programming at SST when they're supposed to be there. You'll notice every day that we start with an advisory period. That'll be used for attendance, for check-in. We're going to be adding a feature where we ask our teachers to be checking in with students once a week with some of their SEL needs. So that's going to be rolled out this fall to staff, and that'll be a time for them to do that. Classes are basically an hour. Every class will meet twice a week for an hour for synchronous time. There's FLT built into the schedule every day. That's our intervention and enrichment block, and that's a time that kids are scheduled, or they can schedule to be in different places depending on what the needs are. The other thing that we've added is a 30-minute wellness period, similar to what the other schools have. So it's actually listed as a period in our day, but lunch is built in there too. So it's a time when we want kids to get outside. We want everyone to be active. And our assistant principal of student life, Mr. Dawson, is going to be putting together some different challenges and initiatives to start to work through that wellness piece and give some kids some opportunities for some more structured activities that they can do independently if they're looking for that. That's kind of the short version. Yeah, that's what I got.
And SEL, just to describe it, would be social emotional learning. So that's all those same types of things that happen during advisory or morning meeting to make sure that the kids are feeling connected, that we're not just helping with their academics, but also their social and emotional needs. Which leaves us with Jody, and Jody's got sort of the through line to the whole system with special education, and she could speak a little bit to 504s. IEP's 504 is still going to be in effect. And Jody, if you want to just talk a little bit about how you're planning to address those needs.
Yes, thank you. So right now, I wish I could give you some concrete plans for the world of special education and Section 504. It is still in process. Governor orders keep changing in respect to kind of the guidance for moving forward. There has been some guidance that we do look at providing, again, what the child needs, making those individual decisions for each child and what they need, and that might include an in-person component. So you'll notice in the reports that have been provided to you, the remote learning for the elementary, the middle, and the high school, it indicates just a vague section on special education that it may include in person. We're looking at if and how that would be feasible and practical for students, how many students it would include, and what the process would be for making those determinations. Essentially, the process would involve individual decisions for every child with an IEP through the IEP team process. For Section 504, similar situation, we're going to have our counseling department be looking at our current 504 plans and seeing if those accommodations can be met currently based off of the current plans, or if they would need to require meetings with those families and that student to look at how best to accommodate them in a remote learning platform.
Thanks, Jody. And one of the things that I know is sort of hanging in the air, it's like, oh, this is remote. So what are we going to do about getting devices to children? How are we going to get all this to happen? We are working on a schedule to make sure that we've got it spread out so that students at different grades are going to be arriving at schools to pick up things at different times. That's still in progress, but we are working on a schedule to have folks go pick things up so that they're not going to conflict. So if you have a second grader and a fifth grader, we're going to make sure those are on completely different days and times, and we will work with you to get your students what they need. I guess we will open it up for questions for clarification or additional information.
Amy?
I'll defer on my 10 points that I've already sent to Patty because I don't want to chew up the rest of the time. That could be an hour or two in and of itself. So I'll come back to those. I thought I heard a made about in the middle school, something being in accordance with the Choose Love movement. What is that?
It's a program that's designed for social emotional learning. And it's a full curriculum, and it's something that the high school already uses. So it's something that the middle school is adapting to as well. And in it, it talks about teaching tolerance, talking about being respectful, responsible, making right choices, those types of things.
And this is one of the things that Governor Sununu has been championing across the state. It is a program that was started by a parent whose son was killed in Sandy Hook. And so she developed this entire program about helping children reach out when things are bothering them, how to find help, how to talk about your feelings. It really is a K through 12 curriculum.
And I'm sorry, just to add on, guidance or school counselors at all levels are familiar with the program, and will be using aspects of it at the elementaries as well.
I don't know who might.
I was just going to say that we had originally planned to bring Charlotte Scott to SAU 17 last year, and unfortunately, COVID happened right before our rescheduled visit. We had to reschedule one visit, and then it put it off. But it is a very powerful program, and there have been some people in our community and district who have attended her training and found it to be very moving and are very positive about bringing that to Sanborn.
Could somebody, and it doesn't matter whom, send me some background on that, some whatever material we have that explains what it is and how it works? Yep. This is news to me, so I would prefer that, or I would appreciate that.
Actually, I would like that as well.
Yeah, probably the whole committee.
We'll send it to the whole board. It's fine. Yeah. It's really, when Charlotte does eventually come and speak, the whole board should attend. So we had planned to actually schedule that on a board meeting night, Jamie. But based on the concerns last spring about the social and emotional impact of remote learning and the COVID crisis, we felt like we needed to move forward a little bit more quickly. But we also recognize that grades 7 and 8 are really an important time for children to learn more about kind of those subtle cues of what's bullying, what's not bullying, how do you take care of yourself, how do you reach out for help. And so Christine identified that as an area of improvement for the middle school, and so she's working on tying that into the high school curriculum so that it's more of an arc.
The other comment I'd have is it was mentioned that two of our teachers had done some research and they have some detailed information. If I could get copies of that also, it was mentioned that would be available. That'd be helpful to me also to understand what they found assessment in the spring. That informs what we're doing in the fall. With that, Tim, I'll defer to you and Dawn, and if you don't use up the whole time, I do have 10 other items that I'll talk about in some form or another, maybe another meeting, or at least circulate and get information. But I do think some of these should be public also, not just ourselves discussing it, because there's a lot of information that's coming in from the public on it.
I would also like the study that Doc Young and who was the other teacher? Aaron
Cass, and yep. We will make sure that they release.
We'll put that in your board packet for you. It's great. It's totally easy to share, and we can get that right out to you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Dawn.
Hi. So I guess I just wanted, I know I read in here, teachers will be available via email during certain times of the day. So will the actual start of the day, like the morning meeting, say for each grade level, will those all start at a set time? So parents, I know that's going to be, but is it like, okay, elementary school is 8 something and middle school is, okay. I just want to make sure that it's a rigid for everyone, so there isn't inconsistency all over the place. And then I really like, and I did ask for it at when we voted on going remote. So I love that you guys incorporated the pre-recorded and then also doing the live instruction. So thank you for doing that. That's really, really important for all of our students. And also the parents that don't know what we're trying to teach our kids. So thank you. I know one of the concerns that quite a few parents brought up to myself and I had with, or an issue that, I had with my students was email is not always the easiest way to get an answer from your teacher. When the student is doing their work and they're trying to get an answer so that they can get through it, waiting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours is a really, really long time to wait for an answer so you can complete something. And when you look at, the length of a school day versus the amount of time the teachers are going to be teaching, I understand they're going to be doing a lot of other stuff in the meantime, but is there a way that we could also incorporate, I don't even know what it's called, but the direct messenger with teachers as well, so that students can maybe get more quicker responses if the teacher is available online? Obviously, maybe there's like during remote, during the direct instruction time when they're on Zooms and Google Meets, maybe have a chart for the students so they know, like, okay, during this time to this time, I can't respond to you, but this time to this time, if I'm available on chat, and that way they know when they're doing their schoolwork, if they get hung up, back online and available for me to ask this question in 20 minutes, so they can move on to something else, or they're not going to be available for the next hour and a half. So I'm going to go on to this other thing that I'm more comfortable with. I don't know. That's just something that I was thinking might be important, because I know that's, when a kid's trying to do their schoolwork, having that faster, or at least knowing a rough time frame of when they might be able to get to their teacher is, important for them.
So there's a couple of things with that. Yes, definitely we can provide, like blocks of time. We're also going to need to check with IT, because even though, so we're a Google district,
right?
And like Google, there's Messenger in there. I don't know if that's something that they would have to toggle on for students, and we might want to look at certain ages can use it and certain can't,
right,
because we're going to need to be careful about, we could get into a cyber bullying situation there.
Right.
Or we could look at a different kind of a workaround, but we can definitely explore that. And I will talk to Gordon. Gordon's listening, and maybe he can take a look at that.
Yeah.
And we'll have an offline conversation, Gordon, about that, and we'll follow up.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention, Dawn, if I may. I love that idea, Dawn, but I want to also frame up, and I think this might address one of Jamie's questions as well. The way that we're approaching remote learning is we're not approaching it we're approaching it through a lens of best practice and instruction. That's a really fancy way of saying workshop instruction. So let me just say what workshop instruction is so that everyone understands what a teacher's. So I'll do it very quickly through the kid lens and then through the teacher lens, so that you can understand how the two pieces overlay. And Patty, we might want to do a little picture for this later. I hadn't thought of it until right now, because I live in workshop instruction and have been working on this with Columbia for 10 years, right? This is really what I believe in is best practice, as does the rest of this team. I mean, we're all committed to this. It's not a unilateral thing, but basically a student logs on and watches a 10 or 15-minute lesson, and then they have what we call authentic learning. And what authentic learning is: real reading, real writing, and solving real legitimate math problems. And then there's another part of most days for younger kids where they're doing what we call word study, which means that they're learning vocabulary, breaking down words, and learning how to be better readers. And for math, it would look like facts practice, right? So there's the application of facts, but then there's the practice of facts, which is, without going in a rabbit hole, Jamie, is the whole everyday math thing, right? Everyday math didn't cover those facts enough. That's one of our goals to fix. So the student would log on and see their 15-minute lesson. Then they might read, depending on their age and grade level, for a period of time, and then log back on and have a mini lesson, a small group lesson with their teacher, with 2 or 3 other students. Now, while that student is reading independently, the teacher's logged on with other students. So if you have an hour block, the teacher is teaching kids the whole hour. They're not just sending out the mini lesson and then doing email. They're actually, our teachers should be teaching the majority of the day, direct contact time with students for almost 4 or 5 hours a day, and then answering questions and planning for whatever time is left. That's the real vision at every grade level, is that parents who can attend synchronous learning will receive real-time feedback with kids about what's going on. So obviously, for kindergartners, that's a little tricky. They're not going to write a 4-page paper independently. They might draw pictures for every page, right? And tell the story verbally. So it is always trickier for the younger kids to engage in workshop instruction and school in general when it's remote. We know that. But from grade 3 or 2 up, my message to the staff was, we did an awesome job this spring with no notice. Now let's take what we learned that went really well in the survey that Brian's team analyzed at the high school showed we can kick it up a lot and really move it forward. And the other thing is that remote learning this spring was constantly temporary. If it's not, my hope and prayer is that in mid-October we're back in school at least even a couple days a week. But if it's not, we have to make this real school now. This isn't funny anymore. Do you know what? It wasn't funny before, but it's serious. Like we have an obligation morally to the people of our community and the children to do everything that we can to make this just like real school every day. So Dawn, did that help you to understand what the teacher will be doing while the kids are working independently?
Yeah, it definitely helps, that definitely helps a little bit more, because it's the way it's on the schedule. It looks like the teacher's going to be teaching for a 60 to 90 minute block, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
that's the way it reads. When parents are going to read this, that's the way it's going to read. So they're going to be going, well, what if my kid has a question outside of that, or they didn't get to ask their question? But the way you just explained it, it sounds like I know it says small group, but when you're saying 2 or 3 students, that's very different than what somebody may picture a small group, which is, 8 kids, where their kid may not get to ask a question. 2 or 3 is very different. You know what I mean? So that is very helpful. And then in that, I guess I also have a question for, I don't know if it's Jody, because we're talking about small group, independent, learning, all of that. I know in the elementary school, and that's when we'll be doing, I'm guessing, IEP type of instruction, 504 type instruction. Is that accurate? Will we be kind of using that time for that?
Yes, so during some of the intervention blocks at the various levels, students will be getting some services that's outlined in their IEPs, as well as through the workshop model. There's time after like the initial instruction. There's also time for students to get additional support, because a lot of times it's related to the classroom instruction as well. So they'll be getting the classroom instruction from the regular education teacher, and then they'll be getting some additional supports depending on the child during that workshop time as well.
Okay. I just wanted clarification, because I want to make sure that if we're really trying to be aware of, the social emotional part and making sure that the students are interacting with classmates. I know that we're talking small group, but I don't want our IEP and 504 students to be so tied to those few students that they don't have time to interact with other classmates as well in small group instruction. I think that's really important too. So I just wanted to, I guess, kind of hash that out in my head, how that would work when you're looking at like the middle school schedule, say, which is different than the elementary schedule.
I think it's important to remember that Jody's going to have to go through over 300 IEP plans and figure out what to do for each student. And yes. And so Dawn, I would say that it depends on what each student needs. And that really will be, as we move forward with special education, the message is figuring out, we need to move on a continuum of programming that focuses on annual growth. If students are making a year or more's growth in their academic area of need, then the plan is working. If they're not making a year's growth, so if a student's in the regular classroom and they're making a year's growth with just a little extra time on assignments, then that's perfectly appropriate because they're making the growth. If the student's in the classroom and they're only making a half year's growth, we need to have a conversation about that plan, because for every year that you're behind, it takes 3 years to catch up, because very few students ever make more than 1.5 years growth. I mean, I've had a few make 2.25, but it's very, very rare. So Jody and I are going to be talking about looking at all the students with IEPs and 504s over this course of this year, and talking about how many of them made a year's growth the last few years, and then figuring out the programming based on the growth instead of the number of minutes available. Does that, for me, it's all about the kids and what they need, not what the schedule allows or the programming. But it does require us to work collaboratively with parents to help them to understand that inclusion's wonderful if it works for their child. Right. But it may not work for every child, and the growth is the most important thing, provided that we can continue to socialize.
Right, and that's why I just wanted to bring up. Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring up, because there are some kids that really are going to need that socialization, whereas others may not. But that's, I just want to make sure that gets, looked at.
Thank you.
And I do want to make a point of saying, Jody, I commend you and all of the special educators that are going to have their work cut out for them in the first 30 days. Because what the governor has put out is, I don't know how he expects everybody to provide direct instruction, all the direct services, and have a meeting with every single parent in the first 30 days of school. It seems impossible. So I commend you and everyone for all the hard work they're going to be putting in, you've already put in, but are going to be putting in, because it's a lot what they're asking to be done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn, for recognizing the special education department.
Thank you, Dawn.
Brian, you had your hand up before. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, thank you. The only thing I think I was going to add, we didn't put it in our plan because we haven't completely fleshed it out yet, but we did add like a help desk scenario where kids, like in the middle of class, if their teacher was busy, they could go to this help desk, and the help desk might be able to help them with that question. And we're looking at how we can try to revamp that a little bit. Some of our literacy and math interventionists and some other support staff to try to make that a little bit more robust for high school kids. Is obviously they can access the focused learning time, and that's every day. But I mean, if they're working on something in the moment, that doesn't help them in the moment, So when we flush that out, we'll put that out again too.
Awesome, thank you.
Thought of that as well, if there could be a central repository for questions to be triaged. Someone could triage them and perhaps get back to the students that, depending on the question. So that's great. We have about 10 minutes left. I think one of the questions that Jamie had that I haven't heard anyone mention, it's kind of outside of this discussion maybe a little bit, but asking about our new math director's involvement, Grace's
It's on my list.
Hmm?
I said it's on my list.
I'll answer that one, because I've worked with Grace directly about it, as is Patty. Grace is already meeting with a tremendous number of teachers and reading all the data. And a lot of her entry plan work was around unpacking 3 areas. One, what's going on with our standardized testing? Where are the areas of concern? What are there any trends in the standardized testing? The second area was looking at the relationship of the instruction to the data that's available in the standardized instruction, so standardized tests. So what could we do differently with teaching and learning to improve those test scores? And then flipping it over, I don't know why, but a couple of my teammates are chuckling a little bit, and I think they're making fun of my hands, so I'm just going to do it even bigger. So then the other thing is, I think the third piece of that whole strand of what Grace is doing is then taking a look at the sequence of the curriculum and building it from 7th grade to 12th grade based on the instructional needs that the data tells us. So it starts with the data and then an analysis of the instruction. So Grace is going to be spending a lot of time watching math lessons on Zoom calls, learning about what's going on with our math instruction. And already she's meeting with the teachers and talking to them about remote learning and what to do. And Patty, did I summarize that? My goal for Grace is to give the board an update early November of kind of everything that she has. We have a very clear plan and goals for her work. And it really is, remember when I first met you all, I'm having Grace do the same entry plan that I did. I want her to meet with all the teachers and any parent that wants to talk to her and listen. Write it all down, summarize it, look at all the data, look at the instruction, and then come to the board with a clear plan the way I did when I met you all. So I'm asking her to do the same entry process. Jamie, you weren't a part of that, but the other board members were. Dawn was a parent at the time, but.
Yeah, I'd like to have an opportunity to sit down with Grace and
absolutely,
and giving her my thoughts.
Yep. Don't scare her.
I'll be very nice on my best behavior.
I'm just kidding. She didn't make the rubrics, Jamie. She's just checking them out.
I just want to see her do the cube. Get it right.
Get the cube right.
0.4 seconds.
And honestly, I'm happy to invite her to these meetings as well. She should be a part of the E.I.S.A committee. So we'll be inviting Grace to join us.
Ryan?
I'll just add, although she's not on the call to hear this, I was very impressed in her first month and a half on the job. When she meets with me, she's already asking a deep enough level of questions that would make me say, wow, she's been working this team for 6 months or a year already. So Tom is not kidding when he says she's diving incredibly deep at this point to try to figure out what's what and where we need to go with things. So, and the team is responding very well to her. It's a very good relationship thus far.
And I would say the same of Matt. He's really doing a great job of building relationships, and they're talking regularly and figuring things out, which is awesome.
Yep.
Jamie?
I won't go through my whole 10, but I will ask that, the ones that I don't get to publicly here to get the response on that. And maybe we might need another meeting. But I do want to point out one of them that I think ties a number of these things together to be successful. And Tom, you and I have talked about this. I think it's very important to have the teachers together in buildings, teaching students, even if it's remote. That allows for the consistency of education, that allows for the consistency of grades, that allows for the collaboration to be able to decipher what's happened during the course of the week. I know that I had people that I talked to off the side that talked about, geez, Friday rather than Monday. What is this, a 3-day weekend? Well, clearly that's not the case if everybody is together, because what they're doing is assessing what worked during the week and being able to collaborate on it and to be able to make week 2 better than week 1, week 3 better than week 2, and to continually grow this. And I think it's important to have those teams together to be able to do that. Tom had mentioned before that it's about what can we do for the kids. In the end, we've got 6 weeks that we have to make a better experience for the kids, and a transfer of knowledge and an ability for them to come up and come back out of where they've been for the spring and really drive a different equation than what they've had. And that was probably my biggest item on my 10. My second biggest item was the IEP, the 504s that we've already talked about. What we did in an emergency situation in the spring was probably the best that could have been achieved, but it wasn't sufficient for the needs of the kids in those programs. So I'm very glad to hear that we're focusing on what do we do from an individual perspective. The different kids have different needs that have to be addressed differently. And we have to find a solution. I don't know how long this is going to last. I wish we were back in, as everybody does. But so long as it lasts, we have to find a solution for those kids. We can't just leave them thinking, well, this is the best that we can do for remote. And, they really shouldn't expect a lot from that because it's remote. We have to find other solutions, other ways, in person in some way, using the outdoors while we still have nice weather, just some things to get and to address those issues. So I'm glad that that's a focus area. I understand that we're not quite there yet in terms of exactly how it's going to work, but I think that's very, very important. So those are probably my 2 biggest items that were on my list. And then a lot of them were more, I'll say more, I won't say mundane, more in the minutia. You got little kids. How do you keep a little kid attached to a learning environment when they're at home where all their toys are and where their dog is and whatever else is going on in their life? and how do you keep them engaged? And when you read the program that you put together, it's a static program. You're trying to convey thought processes into a piece of paper. Doesn't convey well. It doesn't really help people absorb what it is that you're trying to do or how you're going to do it. And I think parents in the community really need some better understanding. So one recommendation might be Brian during a lot of this time did videos about, hey, Sanborn community, this is where we are. And maybe we do some videos about, hey, folks at home, here's some of the things that we're looking at. We understand. Let's talk a little bit about how we engage those pre-Ks to first grade. I'm not quite sure the right direction, but just some thoughts is those little ones are coming into a very bizarre situation for them. And that's going to be a tough road to hoe. Everybody else has got some experience in schooling and, they had their time and a bit remote, but the littlest ones are going to be like, what's going on here? So those are probably my biggest items, and I'll send this around. Well, Patty, you have this. If you could circulate it to the team, and I'd be very, very interested from comments from anyone on their thoughts on it.
I don't have any problem with going an extra 10 minutes if the chair is okay with that, so that we can answer some of those things now.
Okay.
Does anyone object to that?
Chris did have his hand up. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
I want to recognize Chris.
I was just going to say, Jamie, that's a great question. I know that's probably the biggest challenge that we face at Bakey is having the youngest kids, some of whom have never been in school before. And now we're going to have them come into a remote environment. That's one of the biggest reasons why we're having things happen in short chunks of time. It's what we would do in person anyway. But I know one thing I don't fear is kids being able to navigate touchscreen tablets, right? They're experts in that. But I'm very cognizant of their attention span and also the level of support, direct support they're going to need from somebody at home, whether that's a parent or grandparent, an older sibling, whomever that is going to be there. So, I mean, that's why I think you see a shorter amount of total time, on our grid, the younger they are. That doesn't mean that we don't want them engaged. It just means that we're trying to be realistic to what's developmentally appropriate for them. So I'll leave it at that.
Jody?
Thank you, Tammy. I just wanted to say publicly for parents and the community that might be listening to this or watching this, because I have heard from some parents, they've been reaching out to me through email, and I've been trying to address their concerns as best I can. But families with students with disabilities will be starting to hear from their building level coordinators starting next week with specific conversations regarding their individual children. So for any, again, parents or community members listening, I just want them to hear that because I know that there have been a lot of questions with governor orders coming out as far as that communication and that process. We're spending a lot of time this week as a leadership team and as a special education student service department trying to figure out what it's going to look like. It's a work in progress. We're not going to have all the answers next week, but we're going to start reaching out to families next week to start figuring out what it's going to look like for their children.
Tom?
Trying to be good. I got to get back into my Zoom protocol. I do think that Jamie, you had a number of your questions were answered. Which ones do you feel you'd like us to just talk about? I mean, I'd rather take a few minutes and share anything that would help now because of the board meeting on Wednesday. We can also address some things at the board meeting. But it is our hope that the E.I.S.A committee will endorse the plans at the board meeting. So it's important that we answer anything that would prevent you from feeling comfortable doing that this evening.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like the plans. I know how difficult it is to translate it down to a piece of paper. These are just some things that aren't explicitly stated in the plans, and I would like to see in there is a little bit more about the IEPs and just it's going to be individual based. We're going to have to look at that. And there is the blurb about it might be in person, but that's a heart tugger at a lot of communities that have that. And a little bit more there. I think the teachers teaching from the building and the coordination that allows that will address so many of the complaints from the spring about consistency, grade to grade, between like grades, actually deciphering what's happened during the week and making sure that you got a better answer for it. I can certainly tell you that from a work perspective, when we have people that want to do work at home activities and everybody's dispersed to their homes, we try to avoid Fridays simply for the perception, without regard to what the individual person's skills are in being able to work at home alone. People at home on Fridays and or Mondays, but particularly Friday, leave an impression that might not be true, but it's an impression that, if you allow an impression to stay, then people start thinking it's true.
Yeah.
And I think this avoids that completely. And I think the reality of Tom, when you and I talk, what you had laid out, and it allows for a better delivery of educational services to the children of the community. And
It does.
That's what it's all about.
Can I just elaborate on that just a hair?
Sure.
Chair Mahoney? Is that okay, Tim?
Please
Yeah,
do.
I think I think it's, so Jamie, I agree with you 100%. And I think that the team had a lot of kind of consternation at first about changing it from Wednesday to Friday. But Patty and I explained to everyone that the feeling, there's really a threefold effect of having Friday be the day that is the independent work day. The first one is that for our youngest learners, we know that consistency and habit of meeting every day at the same time is really important, and it felt disjointed this spring. And that comes out of the body of research at Teachers College at Columbia University. They tell us if you're going to have a day off from a reading program, don't have it in the middle of a 4-day run. Always either have it be Monday or Friday. So that was part of the conversation. So instructional consistency was one part. The other part was that if you teach for 4 days in a row, you have a pretty good sense of what worked and what didn't work. So collaborating with families and parents for half the day on Friday, and then collaborating with your staff to plan for the upcoming week and do that really, really well and reflect on what worked and what didn't work, and then do things differently the next week. Our goal is to grow the program every week. So at the end of every week, we kind of have a wrap-up time where the teachers are meeting in PLCs, talk about the upcoming week's instruction, and provide that consistency that was so clearly illustrated as a need in the surveys that we received feedback from this spring from the families. So the other thing is that when you think about the just having enough data to make a decision, the positive side of doing it on Wednesday was that you taught for 2 days, you could kind of plan your remote lessons and then have a couple days more. But the problem with that is that then you looped around all the way to Monday with no clear. So really the 4 days in a row were happening over the weekend. It really just provided a way more fluid and comfortable situation for the best instruction.
Did you consider using Monday instead of Friday?
We did, but we felt like we wanted to start the week off with the kids going. So for example, we talked about Columbus Day weekend. That week we'll have school for 4 days. So we were trying to figure out how could we shift when there'll be some weeks where Fridays are independent days, and there will be some weeks where they won't be. But we need to talk about that more. We didn't feel that starting off the week without starting school, I personally just didn't think that was a good idea for kids. Like I want them to be like, it's Monday morning, let's go, chop chop, right? Let's get to work. But again, none of this is set in stone yet. The board has to discuss it and vote. So it certainly is an option, but I would prefer Fridays because I feel like Jamie said, if teachers are in the building and they're working and collaborating, they're laying things out and planning things for Monday, then we hit the ground running and have a big week and then unpack again. I think the growth will be better. Feel free, Patty, to chime in on this.
The other thing about Friday I mentioned earlier was about the math professional development that we'll be having for teachers on Fridays. And she's available on Fridays instead of just disrupting a section of the district and having people sort of on these weird schedules, which is going to confuse folks even more. At least that's going to be another consistent piece. And we know how important the math instruction is and has been.
So the last piece that I'll say is just, it's important to remember that our pre-K schedule does not have school on Friday. So that was the organic, natural day to have everyone breaking, but that wasn't a deal breaker. It's just another. There's so many little pieces to every single decision.
Could you talk about the where you are with having teachers actually teaching from their classrooms in the buildings? Is that a plan?
Yeah. So at this point, we've let teachers know that in the plan, we are recommending that teachers teach from the building. And so the thinking on that is that it's way easier for people to collaborate and focus on instruction when they're at the school. Does anyone on the team want to chime in about that? I think that really is the bottom line, is that it's just easier to focus when you're at school in your office. There certainly, we have to recognize all the different components: social distancing, the needs of different classrooms. Some of the science labs were asking, "Can we teach from school?" Because
I was just going to mention that as a former science teacher. As a former science teacher, there's things I don't want to do in my kitchen. Like, I'm sorry, frog. No, thank you. Can I have, like, I want my setup. No, not in my house. So
right.
No, there's certain things I don't want to do in my kitchen. There's certain things I don't want to do at home. And then just the schlepping of stuff. When I think about the amount of stuff that those teachers had to schlep home in March, and then it's like, I've got this stuff, and it went, and then the question is, when can I get back in the building? And we had that issue last spring. When can I get back in the building? I've got to get XYZ things. And it's all this lugging of stuff back and forth. It's just, I've heard from a number of people, it's just easier to be where your stuff is instead of having to schlep everything back and forth.
I would think it would be. I would be interested in hearing from the principals on what they're hearing from your teachers on what the reception is to that. Go ahead, Brian. And then Chris.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I think it's a lot of other things. There's no perfect solution that works for everybody. And that's, I think, the struggle with anything that we try to put in play is we know that there's no decision that's a one size fits all. You know, I've seen a lot of teachers that have been asking all summer if there was going to be the option to be able to work from the school for all the reasons that Tom mentioned. So that's good. And I think they're going to benefit from that. But I mean, on the other side, we know we have some staff with some really complicated situations at home, and we've got to figure out how to sort all that out if there's something there that needs to be looked at. And that's sort of the struggle, I think, I don't want to speak for the other principals, but definitely from my desk, the struggle comes in with some of the singletons that, you know, have some complicated situations. I think on the whole, though, I mean, I think it's generally something that people are excited that there'd be the opportunity to do where they couldn't do that in the spring.
Chris?
I think, like Brian said, for the vast majority of people, they're going to find a way to make it work. We do have a number of staff that have unique needs that may prompt a need for an FMLA leave because there's an obstacle that's too big for them to overcome to come in, whether it be childcare, healthcare related, whatever. So in the back of my mind, there's probably a few positions that will have to be hired between now and the start of the school year, at least on a long-term subbing basis, if everyone is required to work at the school. I mean, I totally can understand and appreciate, you know, the fact that being in the same building at the same time does allow you full access to what you would normally have if you were teaching in person. But just like we're looking at special education students on an individualized basis, you know, and their needs and what's best for them, we are going to have some staff where the what's going to be required for everyone is not going to work for them.
Right. And it's not even, not to cut you off, Chris, but it's not even like people think, oh, well, they have childcare issues, they got to figure that out. I mean, I had come to me this week that was a family member their parent has taken ill down south. They're going to have to make regular trips on the weekend to help out with mom, you know, and otherwise normally in our schedule wouldn't be an issue, right? Except now we have an issue in place where you need to quarantine for 14 days if you leave New England. So now what do you do with that, right? That's a new situation that none of us could have predicted that but these are just, we'll have to figure those out if we're going to do that. Or if it's going to be, this is for everyone, then we're going to need to figure out, how we handle, I guess, coming up with replacements if people need to take FMLA,
So I'll just chime in briefly and say, Diana Rooney, what the board needs to discuss on Wednesday and what this committee will have to weigh in on, and I want to be careful not to this isn't necessarily an E.I.S.A piece, but it's instructional. So it's kind of a little bit of a ball that's clumped together, right? Like, it's symbiotic, because if you're at school teaching, the teaching's better. And I just wanted to explain why we're discussing this here, because it really is a bigger systemic issue. But I think that I do want the other principals to chime in, but I just think it's really important to recognize that if the board decides to say, we are having remote instruction, but everyone is working from the buildings, that triggers the people that have the concerns that Brian has talked about to reach out to our HR director and work through the process. And we will work with people as best we can with the rules that we have to solve problems. We're not interested, there are a lot of different types of leaves that people can take under the COVID laws, and we will execute those types of leaves on an as needed basis. Did anyone else want to chime in from the principals, or you could each the other ones chime in too, Christine and Ryan?
Sure. I would echo the fact of lots of struggles with folks around FMLA needs, a lot of medical needs, and some concerns based on their families or themselves. So some definite hurdles that we're going to have to overcome. So I would echo that from what Brian and Chris already touched upon.
And I'll just jump in from Memorial's perspective. Just echoing what the other principals have said. We've put out some feelers to our staff, so we've gotten some feedback across the board as far as how staff are feeling, and it's a mixed bag. You have a handful that really have been asking, as Brian alluded to be back in the building, which is a lovely thing. And then we have some very complicated situations, and we're a small district, small community, and we really do want to try to take care of our staff the best we can. But it's going to be a little tricky for a little bit.
And I would echo that. I've heard the same concerns. That the question is where the threshold is, and that's going to be on a case by case basis and based on a lot of really complicated factors. When the central office came back to work in July, everyone was pretty nervous. They were kind of like, getting used to wearing their mask when they went in the hallway to go to the bathroom or to just chit chat about something that needed to be discussed. And what I noticed was that after 4 weeks, it seemed to kind of be okay all of a sudden. You could feel it in the air that everyone was like, oh, we're normal now. Like we show up. Even when the admins met over the last few weeks, we would meet, we would show up, we would sit pretty far away. Some people, were more comfortable than others. And then after a few meetings when no one got sick and things didn't get strange, everybody seemed to I don't know how to say it. You can feel it in the air when people feel more comfortable. And I think that our teachers are rightfully just very nervous right now. And the difference is that what we have to figure out as an administrative team, with Diana's help and probably help from our legal department, is what rises to the level of need versus I'm just nervous or scared. And we don't know that yet. So we have to handle that on a case by case basis. Clearly, if somebody has a significant medical disability and there's around their respiratory system or something, and the doctor is saying, that is backing that up and whatnot, that's one level. But it's really complicated because there's the Americans with Disabilities Act on one side, and then there's the COVID FMLA and the COVID medical condition side on the other side. And there's a lot of different avenues. So really what we need is, and I'm saying this right now to start this conversation off, that should the board choose to ask staff to come to the buildings, they need to let us know right away if they feel that they qualify or need a medical or some type of leave, so that we can work with them.
Brian?
Yeah, I just add, I guess, one more thing for the board to kind of keep in mind, and I've been trying to express this to a lot of people that I talk to about how we get back to normal here. We got to take it one step at a time, right? We went cold turkey into remote learning because we had to, but we have to ease our way back in. So my wife tells me I'm the king of analogies here, and sometimes they're hokey, but sometimes I think they prove a point. You know, when you're cooking and you add egg to something and you temper it in, you can't just add eggs into a hot dish or what? They're gonna cook right on the spot, right? So you have to slowly temper them in. So I think to the extent possible, the board should try to keep in mind that we need to do that with our community. We need to slowly ease ourselves back in. So don't think of it like different phases and we're either in one bucket or the other. Think of it how we can kind of migrate across this continuum that ultimately gets us where we need to be. And it might be the kind of thing where every 2 or 3 weeks, we're doing one slight adjustment to try to get us closer to where we want to be. And I think that's the process that if we can express that to our staff and get them to understand that it is a process and we're being mindful of this and we're trying to do everything, at a comfort level, recognizing what Tom said, that obviously we do have to draw a line in the sand to show people where the starting point is, that we'll have developed the trust with folks that they'll come with us on this journey as we really all just want to get back to normal.
Not to mention, I just think it's really important for everyone to remember that when we made the decision to go remote until October 15th, we were wondering if at that date, the 4th of July had only been 2 weeks before. Everyone wondered if there was going to be a spike in August in New England for Corona, particularly in Maine and New Hampshire. And as of today, it has not happened. It's going down. If this continues to happen, we're bringing kids back October 15th. I mean, I will ask the board to do that. I want that. We all want that. If the cases continue to decline and there's no growth in the schools that have opened are together, then we need to have a conversation about it sincerely. I do get concerned about when we close up the buildings and turn on the heat, so we'll keep monitoring. But I'm certainly being clear with the administrative team that right now we basically have two things going on at once. We're planning for kids to come back to school while simultaneously planning remote instruction, right? So once we get remote instruction up and running, we need to really tighten up the level 3. So I think it's just really important that to just be, since we are sincerely being dynamic. We don't really know yet. I just found out in my hometown of little tiny hometown of Millinocket, Maine, that there was a wedding this weekend where some folks attended from California, and there are 40 cases of Corona today.
Good old Big Moose Lodge, Tom. I saw
Yeah, the
that.
Big Moose Lodge. Oh, good old boys up there.
Yep.
40 cases one weekend. And it just goes to show how 1 or 2 people can affect 40 people in one day. So I just want to be careful, and we're having some great conversations, but I think that the question about the instruction is going to be a big debate, and that certainly there'll be a lot of weighing in from teachers and other people on Wednesday. And I will continue to do we will do our best as an admin team to advise the board and support everyone in doing what's right for kids and for our staff. We love our staff. We don't want to, we want to help them. We're not, but we also need to recognize that by doing what Brian said and starting out and coming back some, if we do have kids on October 15th, I don't want that to be a shock either, where our staff are all scrambling to get childcare because we're back in person. We need to kind of balance that. And that's the trick, is that the other districts are all over the place too. And it just depends on what everyone does. So a lot of sleepless nights. We'll just keep watching the numbers and talking to you all and making a lot of phone calls, right? We're all talking all the time, the principals and I.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else, Jamie or Don, have anything before we?
I just have 2 quick ones. We don't need a response, just food for thought. We've still got some nice weather. There's a lot of kids that haven't had socialization. If you can do some things outside and get some people together, even if it's select people, new people to a school, maybe, or something along those lines. Maybe there's an opportunity there if there's staff that are willing to do that, or if there's staff that's life situation is such that they have no concerns, and then can they help bridge some of those gaps for us? So those are just two other things. Brian talked about a continuum. Is there a play that helps allow us to do that with kids? And maybe that ties into some of these other items that we've been discussing.
You didn't want me to answer, right? Because if I do, it'll be 10 minutes.
What? Oh, listen.
Well,
Everybody else is probably getting
we're
hungry.
taking it slow, Jamie. We'll be in touch on that one. It really depends on staff level comfort, but we are doing some computer pickups and meet and greets, but it's not going to be any kind of group type of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, we want the kids to get to know their teachers for sure. Dawn, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dawn.
That's okay. I was just going to ask, for Wednesday, for the meeting, when this is presented, is it possible to get a generic, what it might look like for Sally in kindergarten, like what their day might look like? And then, maybe another one for second grade, like a couple different grade levels at each building. Obviously middle school, it's going to be one, you know what I mean? High school it's already pretty much set up. But when you're talking like the elementary schools, if it's possible for parents to be able to see roughly what the day might look like so they can kind of wrap their heads around it, and also help their children understand what it might look like so they're not going, because when you look at it on paper, it's very confusing as a parent. I look at it and I go, what does this actually mean? What does the day actually look like? So if there's any way to do something with like some rough timeframes, you have a start time and end time, whatever it is, like that would be a huge, huge help.
I think Mr. McCluskey and Mr. Snyder are up for a video tomorrow when we scheduled this so that we could meet as an admin team tomorrow. And I think the way that I explained it to you, Dawn, really helped. And I'll ask Ryan and Chris to develop a cool video that kind of gives that type of layout. It really felt more three-dimensional to me when I was explaining it to you than what I can write on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Right.
So we'll work on
just a little more, detail would be a huge, huge help. And I'm sorry, Chris and Ryan, I apologize for adding work. But I know that we have a lot of kids that are and a lot of parents that are going to be going, what the heck does the day look like? What does this mean for our students? And it's just going to help ease the parents and the students' anxiety with, okay, well, this is what it might look like, and it's a might, because things are going to change and it's going to be different for every student. Not every student's going to have the same thing, but this is what the day might look like is going to be a huge help for anxiety. So thank you.
Amy?
I just want to also say, because I'm a pain in the neck sometimes, and maybe most times, but thank you. I mean, there's a lot that's gone into this. There's a lot of actions that have been taken. There's a lot of thought that's gone into it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And I'll echo that. Thank you to the team. It really has been a collaborative effort. I'm really happy with the administrative team and the way that we work together. And trust me, it's not conflict free, but it's definitely collaborative.
I thought you were just echoing that I was a pain in the neck.
Well, I am. Yeah.
Well,
In a good way. Thought-provoking way.
It's okay, Jamie. I'm pretty sure Chris and Ryan think I'm a pain in the neck now too. So don't worry, you're in good company.
I won't tell you what my kids' parents think of me. Like my kids' teachers think of me. I'm just going to let that go.
No, but all kidding aside, you guys are asking great questions, right? I mean, we've never been in this situation before, and we're trying to figure it out. And you guys are adding a viewpoint that's slightly different than what we see from our end. So I don't think any of it's a pain in the neck. Don't feel that way at all. Seriously.
No, we really wanted to have this meeting tonight because Dawn's questions, Jamie's, Tammy, like you guys asked questions that help us to prepare things tomorrow to make Wednesday smooth. That's the purpose of the E.I.S.A committee.
Yep.
Right? Is that you're supposed to push us to be like, what did you think of this? Did you think of that? That's the fun. It's if you did a workshop on what a school board is supposed to be like, this is it right here. We're doing it. right? It's a symbiotic cycle. We put stuff out, you give us feedback, you listen to the community, we do too, you know, and we all try to figure it out together. So thank you. All right, I need some dinner. Can I go get dinner now?
I suppose.
Yes. I would also like to thank everyone for all your hard work. There's a lot of work here. It's obvious. Thank you all for your time tonight to, do all this reviewing and prepping. And we look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday and discussing this a little further with the entire board. We'll table our other 2 agenda items till our next meeting. And we are adjourned.